Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night, the room so silent you could hear your own heartbeat, and a question suddenly rises from deep within? Am I truly living as myself? This question often arrives after 40, when the noise of the world begins to fade, and a certain loneliness starts to appear. Not as an enemy, but as a silent messenger bearing a sacred message. We are taught that loneliness is something to be avoided to be filled, with appointments, relationships, or even achievements. But Carl Jung, who spent his life listening to the voice of the human soul, offered another view. Loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to share what matters most with anyone. At 40, an inner door begins to open. The roles you've carried, mother, wife, dutiful daughter, no longer seem enough to define who you are. You start to sense a void. But what the world calls a midlife crisis, Jung saw as a soul's invitation. Imagine this loneliness is no longer a crack to be sealed, but an opening for light to pour in. Not a distance to be closed, but a space where you can finally hear what your own self truly desires. In that silence, the archetype of the crone, the wild and wise woman within, is calling. And if you are brave enough to pause and listen, then that very loneliness may become a journey back to yourself. You are not lost. What you are feeling is sacred, primal, and powerful. And in what follows, we will explore why life after 40 is not simply a pause, but the beginning of the greatest encounter, the meeting with your own soul. Hold fast to your heart, for the road ahead is not easy, but it may be the most beautiful path you have ever walked. At 40, something within you begins to stir quietly. It's no longer the frantic days of chasing work schedules, children's needs, or externally defined roles. It is a gentle yet persistent sensation, as if a part of you is drifting away from ordinary life. Many call this a midlife crisis, but in Jung's view, it is not an end, but the beginning of a profound inner journey, where loneliness itself becomes the first sign that your soul is calling. Loneliness is not emptiness, but the void from which rebirth emerges. In this section, we will peer deeply into 5 psychological truths, 5 gateways to transformation that you may be experiencing right now. Loneliness as the symptom of deep awakening. When the external noise subsides, you finally hear the quiet voice within. Jung wrote that true loneliness arises not from being without people, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself. Medium. Perhaps you've tried speaking to friends about what you're feeling only to receive hollow comfort or empty logic. Picture yourself at a party, a glass in hand, laughter all around, and yet inside a silence unseen. That loneliness doesn't come from a lack of company, but from feeling disconnected from superficial chatter and social roles. That is your soul inviting you into the sacred ground of yourself. The crone archetype in your journey. According to Jung, each life stage manifests a rising archetype. After 40, women step into the realm of the crone, no longer seeking approval, but embodying wisdom, teaching, and healing. She sees through illusion and no longer needs to perform. Sarah Wimet, California Psychotherapy. You might find you no longer care to be seen as beautiful in others' eyes, you care about being real. One former marketing director, confident and captivating, confided that after her 45th birthday, she felt strangely empty despite her successes. She turned to meditation, retrained in therapy, and began listening to her dreams. She said, "I haven't lost direction, I've simply started to live authentically." That may be exactly where you are. Loneliness as the soul's wilderness. Like mythic heroines Psyche, Inanna, or Persephone, you must enter your own wilderness. None can accompany you there. It's where friendships fade, superficial ties unravel, and you wonder who stays when I no longer fit everyone's expectations. Modern culture urges women over 40 to stay slim, stay vibrant, stay desired. But who teaches us to hold on to our soul? Jung believed only by entering darkness alone can one discover a light not dependent on others. That wilderness is not the end, but the place you reclaim your true self. Projection and the shattering of illusions about love. Before 40, love often functions through projection. We cast our unmet yearning, maybe for a missing father or an inner child, onto another. The intensity, the heartbreak often reflect a relationship with an imagined figure, not with a real person. After 40, your soul stops letting illusions persist. Relationships may dissolve not because someone was not enough, but because you know deep down you were using them to fill a void you'd rather not face. One woman shared she always loved emotionally distant, high-achieving men, then felt abandoned. Undergoing depth work, she realized she was projecting onto them the image of her absent father. And it was only through the loneliness after the breakup that she reconnected with her inner child, the one truly needing love. Midlife is the call home, the pilgrimage toward the self. Jung described the second half of life not as an outward journey, but turning inward. What once held meaning, status, sexuality being desired now dims. Not because you stop wanting to live, but because you want to live more deeply. Loneliness becomes the bridge into that deeper self. It teaches you to sit quietly with yourself, listen to your dreams, remember what once made your heart tremble as a child. It leads you to confront what you denied: darkness, weakness, abandoned dreams, and from that confrontation, a new light emerges, the self, your deep whole being. Remember, if you are walking through this transition, you are not alone. Thousands of women are listening to that inner call with quiet courage and patience. Share your experience. By voicing your journey, you not only heal yourself, but help others feel understood. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the symbolic language of dreams and unconscious imagery that often surface in this lonely after 40 landscape, where your soul begins speaking in symbols. Don't miss it, for that's where the real magic begins. Something strange begins to unfold when you enter the solitude of life after 40. Dreams become more vivid. Intuition grows sharper, and at times vague inner images begin to rise. This is the moment Carl Jung believed the collective unconscious begins to speak, not with words but with symbols. Many women report that after a divorce or when their children leave home, strange dreams begin to visit them: an old house with a locked room, a faceless man standing in the mist, or a wolf walking beside them like a guide. These are not random images. They are the soul's whispers, a hidden map leading you home to yourself. Symbols in dreams, messages from the self. Jung believed dreams aren't random chaos. They are the living library of the unconscious. When you fall into solitude, the outer world quiets and the inner one begins to speak in symbols. A 52-year-old woman shared that after retirement, she repeatedly dreamed of climbing a mountain, never reaching the top. Working with a Jungian analyst, she realized the dream mirrored her path of individuation, her ascent toward the self, the integrated whole within her. Have you had dreams like that? Share in the comments. You may be holding a piece of someone else's map. The man in dreams, the face of the animus. For women, Jung taught that the masculine within the animus often appears as male figures in dreams or real relationships. In youth, he may appear as the ideal lover or the heroic figure. But after 40, he transforms, now a guide, a challenger, or even a shadow you must confront. One divorced woman shared she kept dreaming of a cold man saying, "You don't need anyone. You only need the truth." At first, the dream terrified her, but gradually she understood he was not someone else. He was the unawakened strength within herself. No longer seeking validation, she was being invited to embody a fierce feminine one who wields both intuition and intellect. The shadow, the uninvited guest you need to meet. In solitude, free from distraction, your shadow starts to emerge. The repressed parts of you, anger, jealousy, desire, the feeling of not being enough. Jung named this the shadow in meeting. It is not about punishment, but wholeness. You cannot love yourself if you reject part of who you are. One former teacher shared that after retirement, she discovered a deep envy of younger women. Instead of feeling guilty, she learned to see it as a message. She had abandoned her own creativity and vibrancy. Are you facing an ugly emotion lately? Don't run. It may be the key to a forgotten part of your soul. Disorientation is a necessary stage of transformation. Jung emphasized that individuation often begins with the temporary collapse of the old self. After 40, the roles that once defined you, career, identity, relationships, start to shake. You may feel like, "I no longer know who I am." But that's not a loss, it's the beginning of true freedom. A successful attorney shared that entering her 50s felt like being lost at sea with no map. But in that vast emptiness, she rediscovered art, starting to paint from scratch. She wasn't lost, she was being led by a deeper compass. Loneliness as a sacred space for transformation. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain, and no transformation without solitude." When no one understands you, when you can explain what's happening, that is often where inner metamorphosis begins. You are not lost, you are being prepared for a new shape, a new role, a deeper soul. Stay in the stillness a little longer. Write your dreams. Walk alone in nature, not to find an answer, but to listen to the soul's whisper. You are not alone. Share your dreams, your feelings, or any image that's haunting you in the comments. By speaking them aloud, you not only unlock your own path, you help other women see that they too are not walking this journey alone. And in the next part, we'll explore how to turn loneliness into a sacred art of living, a path of creativity, connection, and soul rebirth. This journey isn't over. It's just beginning, and you are absolutely worthy of the depth that is calling you. There is a quiet moment while you're washing dishes, watching sunlight stream through the kitchen window, or sitting alone on the sofa at midnight when you suddenly realize you're not afraid of loneliness anymore. You've entered a different state. You no longer resist it, you live in it with it. And slowly you begin to see the beauty within isolation. This is the turning point when loneliness is no longer sorrow, but a sacred art of living. Carl Jung once said real transformation doesn't come from adding something new, but from letting go of the old so that what truly wants to be born can emerge. In this section, we explore how to turn post-40 loneliness into a rite of passage, a source of inner light, and above all, a strength that allows you to live more fully as yourself. Letting go of old roles and the pain of being no one. You were once the devoted wife, the capable mother, the magnetic woman at parties. But now your children are grown, your marriage has cooled or dissolved, the admiring glances have faded. You begin to feel as though you're disappearing. This is a quiet grief. Few speak of the pain of no longer being defined by others. But it is also your opening into the most profound phase of Jung's process of individuation, returning to your true self, stripped of all masks. Creativity, a gateway to the soul. Jung believed creativity is how the unconscious finds its voice. When you write, paint, sing, dance, garden, or cook with presence, you give your inner depths an outlet. That's why so many women after 40 turn to art, pottery, poetry, or storytelling, not for success, but to keep their souls alive. A 47-year-old former accountant shared that she began sculpting clay on sleepless nights. The small, shapeless figures she formed didn't matter. What mattered was this: when she touched the clay, she was speaking to something deep within. And strangely, her depression softened and tears came like a release. You don't need to be an artist. You just need to let yourself create without goals, without judgment. Deep connection, not many connections. Loneliness is not the absence of people. It's the absence of soulful sharing. After 40, we no longer crave surface relationships or polite small talk. We long for truth, rawness, soul. Start by seeking a small circle where you can speak what's real. It might be a young reading group, an art therapy circle, a YouTube community like this one, where women after 40, after the cracks, are walking this awakening path together. Share your story in the comments. Even a few lines may reach someone quietly sitting on the other side of the screen, searching for a mirror of their own journey. Releasing the happiness assignment and beginning to live honestly. There is heavy pressure on midlife women to be happy, to be stable, to be grateful for what they have. But sometimes you're not happy. You feel empty. Life seems to have lost meaning. And that's not a problem, that's a signal. Jung said every psychological crisis is a chance for spiritual rebirth. You don't have to pretend to be okay. You're allowed to say, I don't know who I am right now, but I want to find out. That is the beginning of the deepest journey one can take. Loneliness as a companion, no longer the enemy. Eventually, when you stop resisting loneliness, it softens. It becomes a place, a landscape where you can walk with yourself. You begin to enjoy your own company without guilt. You look into the mirror and no longer see emptiness, but presence. You might start writing a few lines each morning, or walking alone without headphones, or simply watching the rain fall doing nothing. These are small acts, but they are powerful gestures of return. Loneliness after 40 is not a malfunction. It is a ritual of transformation, a pause from the universe inviting you back to your soul, to peel away what no longer fits and become the woman you were born to be. And if you're still uncertain or afraid, know this: you are not alone. All over the world, women are sitting just like you, hands wrapped around warm mugs of tea, gazing into the distance and holding the same quiet question: is this the end or the beginning? In the next and final part, we'll arrive at the conclusion where you'll discover that beyond loneliness, there is not just hope, but light, direction, and a new strength waiting to be born within you. Let's keep going, because on the other side of solitude lies the gateway to the most authentic life you've ever known. There's something almost no one tells you clearly. After 40, when you enter the deep terrain of solitude, when old roles dissolve, when silence is no longer a choice, but a default state. You are being summoned into another dimension of existence. Here, life no longer revolves around what you do or who approves of you. Instead, you're invited to face one foundational question: who am I beyond the roles I've played? Carl Jung called this period a time of inner reordering, a stage where you no longer seek value from the outside, but turn inward to rebuild your entire system of belief, emotion, and meaning. And in this part, we will step into one of the most important processes in depth psychology dialogue, with the old self and the sacred permission to let a new self emerge. The cracking of the old self and the pain that must be felt. You once believed you were strong, independent, capable. You held your family together. You raised children. You kept love alive. But one day, even you don't recognize yourself anymore. You look in the mirror and see a stranger. The confident eyes of youth are gone. So is the boundless energy. What remains is fatigue and a hovering question. What am I living for? Don't panic. This is necessary. Jung wrote, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You must pass through this fracture. You must mourn the self-image that no longer fits so the authentic self can emerge. The invisible moments that shape you the most. A 54-year-old woman once shared, I used to fear being alone at night, but slowly I learned to light a candle, play soft piano music, and just sit there not doing anything. At first it felt empty, but after a while it felt peaceful. Not every transformation is born from crisis. Sometimes the new self takes root in the simplest moments, quietly cleaning the kitchen, writing a few lines in a journal, touching a warm cup of tea. If you're living in those moments, know this: you are doing sacred work, letting go of expectations to find inner freedom. Many enter midlife with the ache of, I didn't become what I hoped. Maybe you dreamed of being an artist but became a civil servant. You longed for lifelong love but went through a divorce. You aimed to be the perfect mom, but your child rebelled. And now you quietly say, I have failed. But pause, who set those expectations? Often it was society, parents, school voices that were never yours. Jung believed midlife is when we reclaim our projections, meaning we stop look deeply at what's truly ours and release the dreams that no longer fit. Only when you allow yourself to fail by old standards can you succeed by your own definition. Love after 40, no longer a place to hide, but a place to return to. One of midlife's most tender wounds is the feeling of being no longer loved like before. But what's also true is you no longer love like before. In youth, we love to be validated. In midlife, we love to be illuminated. You no longer need someone to save you from loneliness. You need someone who can sit with their own solitude and still cherish your quiet presence. If you haven't met that person yet, don't despair. Perhaps the one you need to meet is yourself. And if you are with someone, try saying what you've never dared him changing. I don't need you to fix me. I just need to be seen and heard deeply. You might be surprised by what unfolds in that honest moment. Living alone and finding that the soul finally has a home. Have you heard Jung's words? The most intense loneliness is not from lacking a partner, but from living in a house where the soul has no home. So ask yourself, is your home a place where your soul feels welcome? If not done, start by repainting the walls or replacing the furniture. Start by changing the way you inhabit that space. Create a small corner to breathe, a space to write, a spot for a single flower, a candle, a symbolic object that means something to you. Let your outer space become a mirror for your inner world. And then slowly, you'll find that you're no longer afraid of living alone, because you were never truly alone to begin with. If you're walking this path right now, please know what you're doing is a quiet revolution. Not everyone dares to live honestly, to reflect, to let go and begin again. But you are doing just that. And I believe that women like you, when connected, can shape a culture of depth, meaning, and healing for generations to come. Leave a comment. What have you let go of after 40? What are you starting to discover within yourself? I want to hear your story. Others do too. And who knows, your small sharing today may be the exact message someone across the world has been aching to hear. In the next and final part of this video, we will take a panoramic view of solitude as a sacred calling. Not to close the story, but to open a new life, one where you live as yourself fully, gently, and powerfully. There's a quiet moment few speak of. When you turn 45, 50, or 55 and suddenly realize you're now living a part of life no one ever taught you how to live. You're no longer in the blaze of youth, not yet in old age. You stand between two shores, one of all that is past and one of a land that has no name yet. And it is in that space that loneliness stops being a wound and becomes a sacred rite of passage into your deepest awakening. Carl Jung believed that each of us carries within a silent calling, a telos, a purpose that only the soul can hear. And most often this calling does not rise through noise, but through silence, through dreams, through the emptiness that follows once every role has fallen away. In this final part, we'll step into the deepest layer of the post-40 journey, the moment the soul begins to be heard. Intuition, the primal voice long forgotten. After years of living by logic, duty, and obligation, the midlife woman often discovers a new voice, quiet but commanding from within. You begin to feel something is right or wrong, not with proof, but like a wave rising from deep in your body. This is intuition, the archetypal feminine sense that modern society has long silenced. Jung called it the rebirth of the feeling function, when a woman begins to trust her inner knowing more than the outer norms. One woman, after 25 years as a doctor, walked away from medicine to become a gardener. She didn't know why. Only that when her hands touched the earth, her heart softened. And in that soil, she began to finally hear herself, something she had silenced for 25 years. Symbols and dreams, mirrors of the soul. In midlife, dreams no longer feel meaningless. They become a living library of the personal and collective unconscious. Jung wrote, when the ego loses absolute control, dreams begin to reveal what the soul needs. Many women describe strange dreams, climbing mountains without a peak, unlocking secret rooms, seeing lost loved ones wandering through dark forests. These symbols are not random. They are a map. Start by writing down your dreams, even if they don't make sense. Over time, you'll notice patterns, and that is the path of individuation your soul longs to walk. Share your dream symbols in the comments. Someone else may be dreaming the same dream, and then you will know you are not alone. Becoming a guide light shaped by your own darkness. After walking through your personal darkness, you enter a new stage, becoming the elder, the way shower, the keeper of inner wisdom. Jung called this the emergence of the self, the integrated whole. You don't need to be a therapist or writer to help others. All you need is the courage to tell the truth of your lived experience without performance, without polish. Just as you're reading this now, just as I'm writing these words from someone who has walked the desert to someone who may be standing at its edge. Leave a sentence about your journey, not perfect, just real, because every honest story is medicine for another soul. Loneliness, no longer a feeling, but a state of being. Once you move through the layers of fear, emptiness, anger, and grief, you'll find that loneliness is no longer pain. It becomes presence, a sacred stillness where truth is near, where nothing needs to be explained. You no longer need to be understood. You no longer strive to be interesting. You are full in the simplicity of an empty afternoon, in the flicker of candlelight, in the soft hum of classical music in your little kitchen. Jung called this the state of one who has met themselves. A new life born of silence. And finally, after all of it, you realize you are no longer the woman you were at 30. Not just a mother, a wife, a worker, as the world once called you. You are the witness, the keeper of symbols, the bearer of soul light to the generations after you, simply by living fully as yourself. You begin to choose everything again, how you love, how you live, what you keep, what you let go. No longer in haste, you learn to let things unfold because now you know beneath all movement is an eternal current that never disappears, and you are part of it. If you've made it this far into the video, you may be in the most sacred season of your life, where you no longer define yourself, you simply become yourself. And if that's true, leave a comment with just one phrase, I'm awakening. Because maybe someone needs to see those words today, to believe that they're not walking this path alone. Stay with us for the final reflection, where we'll weave together this entire journey into one message. That loneliness after 40 is not a mistake, but a great summons. And you, the one reading these words, you are ready to answer it. Perhaps you're sitting alone right now, the screen glowing softly in a quiet room, and you've just journeyed with me from the nameless loneliness after 40 to that awakening moment when you realize this is not an ending, but a hidden beginning. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And I believe if you're still here, still listening to these final words, then you are someone brave enough to walk that path, the path of returning to your whole self, even when no one applauds, even when no one points the way. You've spent long enough living for others. Now it's time to live for you. Not a perfect version, Not a proper woman, but you with your cracks, your fragments, and the quiet light slowly spreading from within. Loneliness after 40 is no longer something to fix. It becomes sacred space where you relearn how to breathe, how to touch your soul, how to live slowly enough to see what truly matters. And you are not alone. Here in this space, many women are awakening. They are rewriting the middle chapters of their lives with their own words, making small but deeply meaningful choices. They are learning to say no, learning to cry without shame, learning to love themselves as if for the first time. If you are one of them, leave a comment that simply says, "I am learning to live again." That one small line might be the open door someone else is longing for right now. And if something I shared today touched you, please subscribe to this channel. Not for the numbers, but because I truly believe you deserve a place to return to a space where words like shadow intuition, soul, and healing are not dismissed, but honored as sacred parts of your journey. Every week, I'll keep sharing videos that help you dive deeper into the inner world, exploring archetypes, understanding yourself more fully, and most importantly, knowing you are not alone on this path. Share this video with someone who might need it, someone silently carrying their loneliness, someone trying to gather the pieces of their life and find their way back home. And if you remember just one thing today, let it be this: loneliness is not the enemy. It is the messenger carrying a sacred message from your soul. You've paused, you've listened, and that alone is a profound step, one that many never dare to take. Thank you for staying until the very end. I hope to see you in the next video where we'll explore the nature of true love, the fear of abandonment, and how healing begins through dialogue with the unconscious. Because deep down, we are all on a journey to return home to the place where our soul can finally rest. What would you like the next video to explore? Leave your suggestion in the comments. I read everyone. And if this feels like a journey worth continuing, don't forget to hit the bell so you won't miss what's next. I'll meet you again on the other side of the light.